Hey, everybody. We are so excited. The next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about learning. And one of the primary things that separate you from the pelicans I saw flying over the ocean this morning is we don't have to operate our lives out of instinct. We can learn. We are also going to introduce you to our new book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades, coming out September 17th. And you want to
special.
Introduce the world to
This is very special because on this book, our daughter Chloe and our niece Alize were a part of writing it, and that's really special for us. So today we've got Chloe. Actually, for the whole week, we've got Chloe here with us talking about being a good student and what some of the challenges have been for her and how she overcame them, and how to be a good student and how to optimize your learning.
And it's not just if you're in school.
Right.
This is really important. Many of the principles we're going to talk about is, well, how do you get a raise at work? You learn new things. You make yourself more valuable. How do you prevent aging as you learn new things?
Right. Yeah.
So change your brain, change your grades. People who have gotten the prior version of this, which called Secrets of Successful Students, that I actually wrote in 1982. It was a little before Chloe's time.
A little before the internet.
But in 1982, what had happened, so I was a mediocre student in high school. Like 2.8 was my GPA out of high school, which means I was paying attention to girls, not to my classwork. But out of college, I was a 3.93 and had virtually straight A's in medical school. And I taught a course in medical school. I was in the charter class, so we didn't have upperclassmen. I was always the oldest. Our class was the first one. And so I taught a seminar for students coming behind on how to do medical school. And when I graduated from medical school in 1982, I went, I should probably write that. How does someone go from being sort of a mediocre student to a great student? There's a method for that. And I love sharing it. But then recently, I'm like, I need to revise that book. And I realized the internet wasn't invented when I had written that book, and computers.
You were handwriting your papers, probably.
I handwrote the first version of this book.
We had to sit in the library. I remember doing research in the library.
And so I tapped Chloe, who's actually a wonderful student, virtually a straight A student, and Alize, who you'll meet, same thing. And I'm like, let's update this. My sneaky purpose was I really wanted them to read the book and read the principles in the book and help me with it, and which they did. So are you introducing Chloe?
I did. I just introduced her. This is Chloe.
I got an introduction.
So Chloe is actually going to be a junior. So you just finished your sophomore year, and she's taking weighted classes, and she got straight A's, which means she's actually above a 4.0 now, which is really fun and exciting. And she's also volunteering. She does a lot of volunteer work. She's on the Mayor's Youth Council. She's on the National Honor Society. And she's involved in a whole bunch of activities. And so, we're really proud of her. But we've always told her something really important that I think is really important. I've never celebrated or really encouraged, I've never made a big deal out of her grades. It's always been the effort. So it's always been the effort that we made a big deal. It's it's how much work she puts in that is really important, because we've often seen.
We actually recommend don't tell your kids they're smart.
Right.
Because if it's hard for them, then they'll go, I'm really not smart.
Yeah.
But if you praise them for working hard, and Chloe works very hard,
right,
then.
And grades didn't always come super easy when she was really young.
No.
And so that the fact that she had to learn how to work hard is now why she does so well.
And I had to learn just how I learn too, because not everyone learns the same. Not everything works for everyone. It's not the same formula for everyone. And I've had to kind of learn that as I've gone along. And that I'm not one of those people who's just naturally, it just comes easy. In order to get really good grades, I have to put in a lot of studying and a lot of time. It doesn't just like come naturally, but I've learned that that's just how it is. And I think everyone has their different ways of learning. And when you really figure out what works for you and how you learn and you just accept it, you can make it a lot easier for yourself, or you can make it a lot harder for yourself.
But one thing I do notice is you tend to remember things because of the amount of studying you put in, probably.
Yes.
So she tends to
Well,
remember
so
the information.
you take it seriously. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I learned, so trick number one is before you go to class, read what they're going to talk about in class. So that way, because so often students are completely clueless and they come unprepared.
Right.
And, but I learned if I read the chapter or whatever we're going to talk about ahead of time, then the teacher would then reinforce it. I would
Yeah.
ask smart questions, which would embed me in their head
Yeah.
as someone who actually cared. And I've noticed, Chloe, that you actually outline what the lesson is. So
Right. And I
So
have
you could sell those notes.
I have a system for that, but I also have kind of a little bit of an advantage in that sense because I do online. So I get all of my notes in front of me. So
Let me clarify
it's-
that. What she's saying is we homeschool. She has an online program that she does, an online
Right.
school program.
So it's the same lessons, but all of them are online, and I just have to read them kind of through myself. I don't really have a teacher that guides me through it, which at first was really hard for me because I'm used to having a teacher like, okay, these are the important parts. These are what you really need to take
This
notes
is what's
on.
going to be on the test.
Right. The teachers give you the little like, oh, this
Pay attention.
Pay attention to this part. I don't have any of that, but I've learned to kind of outline the important parts. But translating what you said about reading the lessons first, I think when that going over to high school, that can be hard sometimes because if you've ever been in a high school class, they are very unpredictable. So sometimes the teachers are like, kids come in and they're talking and it's hard to focus. But if you're in high school and you go in ahead of time at lunch or whatever, usually teachers will help you out. And if you say, look, I want to just kind of get ahead, I want to know what we're learning today, they'll usually help you if you take the time to go in. But
Yeah, because you haven't always done.
But college classes, if I'm right, I think with college classes that's a little bit easier.
Well,
reading
they have
lessons
class
first.
hours. They have teachers' hours or professors'
Office
hours. But she didn't always do homeschool. You were in a traditional school up until the middle of 8th grade, almost the end of 8th grade. So she knows sort of the system, how that works too.
Right.
And we should, in one of these episodes, we're going to talk about the difference. For those of you who either are in homeschool programs or are interested in them, or you want to hear the differences between the two. It's really interesting because it's different.
Well, we can talk about it a little bit. And Alizé's in traditional school, and we'll hear from her next week. Chloe's not. And one of the reasons I really like it is sleep.
Yep.
And because when
Yeah, me
you're
too.
homeschooled, you are much more likely to get 7 or 8 hours of sleep.
Or 9.
And it might sound like Chloe's like, working all the time. And it's just not true. That I think now she actually has a much more balanced life.
Right.
That, we can sit in the morning and have coffee or tea and chat. It's not running out of the door and you're
At
actually
6:30, yeah.
missing all the time. You have to get your makeup done. You have to get to the bus. You have to come
Well, it's
home.
an hour
And
from the time you walk out the door to get to school.
so sleep is the most important thing for me because the brain is developing.
Well, and the rate of depression in teens that get 1 hour less of sleep is what is the increase?
Significantly higher, and suicide is higher in kids who
Get
don't
1 less hour.
Well, if I
sleep.
can add something to that too, just getting alone, just more sleep is beneficial. But also the reason why I like it is because their prime time for productivity changes between people. So I have friends who work best at 2:00 in the morning. That is not me at all. Come 6:00, I'm like, can't focus on anything, like just nothing. But I can focus at 6:00 in the morning. And when you're in traditional school, sometimes you just don't get that option because there's like, set hours. So that's why I like what I do
Because
as
it's
well.
flexible.
Also for that reason. So if you would rather sleep in until 9 and then, get up and
Work
do
late.
whatever and then work later, that's fine. Or get up earlier and then you have the afternoon.
So the second tip is know your sweet spot.
Know your time, right? Know your best time, and just
your best time
for the book in general. I think this was one of the tips that I added in there. Know what time of day that you study better. So it's almost like doing an experiment. Study it for one test. Study at this time, and see how you do. For the next test, study at night rather than in the morning, and see how you do. See how much of the information you retain, and then oh, I study best and I take in most of the information or more of the information at that time.
Yeah, you're like me. I'm a morning person.
After each podcast in the next 2 weeks, we're going to give one of the books away. And if you go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com, leave a comment, and in the subject line, put Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades raffle. We will enter you into the free drawing. We're going to talk about relationships with teachers when coming up.
Welcome back. We are on day 2 talking about Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades. And I'm so excited and so happy. We've got Chloe here. Chloe is our 15-year-old daughter, and it's just such an honor to have her be part of this book. So yeah,
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about brain types and how that affects your studying. So it's fun because we have Chloe part of the book, and we have our niece Alize is also part of the book.
Who you will meet coming up.
In the second week, the second half of this. And they have their brains are exactly opposite. I mean, they couldn't be more opposite. So we should talk a little bit about that and how it affects them. They're both excellent students. And for opposite reasons, it could have affected them in very negative ways. So we should talk about that and how they've overcome, how you've overcome.
Well,
and
we actually talk about it. When we write that when we scanned Chloe, she had a very busy brain.
Very busy, very anxious.
And needed things a certain way.
Yeah, she could get really
so
stuck.
Having her place of study organized as she likes it, that fits, where Alize actually has a sleepy brain.
And can be very disorganized by nature.
That's not nearly as important to her, but it can also cause her great stress because both of them love doing well in school.
Right.
And they come at it from very different. So in the book, we talk about brain types, how everybody's brain is not the same, and that you should know your type and then work on optimizing.
Right. So we've come up with strategies to help Chloe. For example, there are certain supplements that help her to settle her down, like we'll talk more about that. Also her, like you touched on one of them, her workspace has to be a certain way. Chloe needs things to be very organized. She's sort of, she's less rigid now. When you were young, you were rigid.
Gotten better, yes.
Yeah. So she needs things to be organized though. If you walk into Alize's room, it's a very different story. Her room looks completely different. That's not as important to her. But that can be a challenge for her because when things aren't organized, she can then get stressed out because she can't find things or she's running late. And so she had to learn how to work within her type as well.
Yeah.
Well, and what makes Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades different than virtually every other study book you could read is the foundational principle of Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades is get your brain right. And learning follows.
So
if you don't take care of the physical functioning of your brain, so eating right, exercising, not using drugs, putting your brain in a healing environment is the number one most important thing to doing well.
So what do you think? What's been the best for you with your brain type?
So for me, the big thing, especially lately, just in the past year, because I'm a junior now, and sophomore and junior year, it gets real. Like it's just
the workload's heavy. Yes.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing I've had to overcome in this past year and going into this year now is balance because, I mean, you were just saying how we have very different, Alize and I even have very different brain types. It's a really good example because she has had to overcome certain aspects of naturally not quite being as rigid or not being as organized. And I'm naturally, very organized. But, one thing I've kind of learned is that for me, it's achieving balance, because being super organized and being really rigid sometimes doesn't serve you in school either. Doesn't serve
Right.
you in studying either, because you're not going to be able to control everything. Your workspace is sometimes not going to be how you want it to be. It's not, it's not everything's going to go how you want it to go. Not all of your lessons are going to go how you want it to go. And
It's a really good point.
yeah, so being super organized by nature is, being organized is good. Wanting to be organized is good. But
Being rigid is different.
Did you ever
But
have
not
this
being-
perfectionistic quality?
Yeah, not the same way she does, but we used to put flexibility on her chore chart. Do you
right.
remember?
there comes a point when, if you're too rigid and too organized and you're so stuck on it, your productivity actually starts to
Go down.
decline, because you get stuck on little things. And if you can't let go, one test missing of those couple questions, it's like, I studied that. Why did I get it wrong? I shouldn't have got it wrong.
That was
you
me.
can't get past that, you're gonna get tripped up on the next test too, because you can't get over that one. It's just,
So it's
That
looping.
was
It's
actually
looping,
me
right.
in college. If I got a 95 on a test, I could only focus on the 5% I missed. And so that's a very good point.
What did you say about perfection?
Yeah, perfectionism is an excuse to fail. So because especially for women, it's this, we get stuck in this loop of, I have to do it perfectly, and if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all. I'm going to pick up my toys and go home. And so you end up not meeting your potential.
Well, and another really interesting thing about Chloe when we scanned her, so the front part of her brain was really busy, and so that can go with worry and trouble letting things go. But her cerebellum in the back bottom part of her brain was sleepy, and that's the processor in the brain. And we used to, more you than me, but used to get upset because she'd try a sport and then she'd quit because she couldn't be perfect. But she also struggled with the coordination part. And one of the big things is she then started dance.
And martial arts.
Dance and is a coordination exercise.
Right.
So actually working on the vulnerable area of your brain, strengthening that, I've just seen every other part of you get better.
Well, dance and martial arts
you
really
know,
helped.
The past year and a half, I've taken on doing so many different things that are not even related
Out of your
to each
comfort
other.
zone, too.
Out of my comfort zone. I'm like, that I'm not naturally good at, and that, it just doesn't just come easy. But something I want to add to what you were just saying is, for me, it's changing the actual thought. It's changing the perspective around it, because I'm not, all these things that I've taken on, there are more opportunities to succeed, but there are also more opportunities to fail, right? So when I started taking on all these different things, I'm like, oh, but if I'm not good at that, or I'm not good today at this, or, if I'm lacking in this area, that's a chance, I might fail at this. But what I had to do is just go actually into my thought, into my mindset, and change it to, okay, well, I didn't do as well as I wanted to today, but this is just basically a stepping stone to, the next step of what I'm going into. And I actually read, what was the book? I don't remember what the book was. I'm kind of getting off topic now. But I read a book that had a really good reference, a really good line. And it basically said that you've improved when you are not as good at a new thing, or at a new level of something that you started. Because if you're working in stages, and here's the bottom, here's the top, if you're working in different levels, in order to get to the top of one level, you have to start at the bottom. So you get to the top of one level, and then you start at the bottom of the next one, and then you work right up to the top again, and you're
You're
at
not
the bottom.
supposed to be good when
So
you
that's
start.
how I've had to change it, because I'm like, every time I'd do something wrong, or I would quote unquote fail, my first reaction is, I'm not good at this, right? Like I failed. I don't look good doing this. But then it's just like deep breath, and it's just a change in mindset that's like, no, I'm at the next level. This failure means I'm at the next level, you know? So that's just kind of, it's optimizing your thoughts too, a lot of it.
So mindset.
I love that.
Yeah.
It actually reminds me, last night we had 3 of our 5 grandchildren over swimming.
Oh my God, they're so
and
cute.
Haven is now a
Oh my
year
God.
old and so cute, but so busy. But
So
watching
busy.
her walk, and
She looks
she
drunk.
looks drunk.
Yeah.
And then she falls on her butt like a lot. But it doesn't bother her.
No, she laughs.
To fall, and then she just gets up and keeps going.
Yeah.
And you have to have your eyes on her all the time.
She just laughs.
But falling is a part of learning. So that's what you're learning.
Right.
And whenever people go, oh, I should be better, I'm no good at this. Like a lot of you probably say that about learning languages. And so you don't try, therefore you're no good at it. And so using Chloe's perspective that it's about levels.
Right.
And if you're not doing well, you're at the next level. You're just at the bottom of the step of the next level.
But I'm at the next level
But
from
you're
where
at
I
the
was
next
before,
level.
right? Because if you're just good at it the entire time, you're probably not challenging yourself. And for me, I like, if she knows anything about me, and if you know anything about me, I have to be challenged constantly because I'm so like, I'm just naturally have
Driven.
to be
Yeah.
doing something all the
That's
time.
because
be
of your
good at
frontal
something.
lobes. Before we let this one get away, I want to talk about one of the most important things in the book besides getting your brain right, and that is getting your relationships right. Because I learned early on in school, when I started doing well, is that teachers or bosses are people too. And if you're rude to them, if you don't show up with your best self,
Yep.
they're going to lower your grade or
If you're on the
lower
board-
your promotion. So a trick I learned was I would actually, before the semester started, I would read my books and I would say to myself, the first month, I'm going to be so prepared and so kind and so present. Now, not being like a kiss ass. I'm
You
just,
kind of were.
I'm just like, I'm prepared.
Right. It's not a bad
Because
thing.
First impressions really do matter.
Right.
And so if they saw that I was a good student for that first month, the rest of the year they'd leave me alone.
Right.
They wouldn't pick on
So
me.
true.
But if I showed up unprepared, they would get that, oh, Daniel's unprepared.
And that's
He
it.
doesn't care.
Right.
And getting rid of that first impression is just so hard.
Teachers, yeah.
You like being teacher's pet. You've always been teacher's pet.
Yes, you know what? A long time ago, it's
You made
all
peace
through
with it?
elementary school and middle school. It was like, oh, Chloe's a teacher's pet. She's friends with all the teachers. She has lunch with all the teachers. Okay, first of all, what's wrong with that? There's nothing
Having
wrong
lunch
with
with
that.
teachers.
I'm going to get really off topic in a minute. But no. So I was always the teacher's pet. But I think that kind of adding to what Daniel was saying, how I saw it in my head is you want to be the teacher's pet, and because they like you for who you are and who you want to be, who you're bringing to the table, not because you're trying to be who they want you to be. And I've noticed teachers are like this. They don't actually like the kid who it's like, oh, tell me everything. Just tell the teacher what they want to hear, right? It's like they like the kid who comes in prepared and is confident in what they know and is confident and ready
Well, they're
to learn.
participating.
And they're
Prepared.
participating
Right.
and they're ready to
They
learn.
One of
are
my professors
prepared.
that I had the best relationship with was the one I argued with the most. But it's because I was
Right.
prepared.
And not only that,
he
you're-
loved me because
and
Is
not
that
only
why you
that,
argue
you're
with me all the
confident.
time?
yeah, because
Because of
Teachers-
that teacher?
The goal of a teacher, the teacher's job is to teach kids how to have their own thoughts and teach kids how to do well in the world. In order
Right.
to do well in the world, you need to use your own mind. And kind of just what I've learned is that if you can show them that you're confident in what you say without being,
Rude.
combative,
Mhm.
that they like that. They
Yeah.
like that you're willing to stand up for what you
Right. Like I wouldn't be rude, but I was adamant he had to change one of the questions on our test because it was wrong.
Right.
And I had my notes.
When we come back, we're going to talk about nutrition and learning. It's so important.
So important.
And if you want to be entered into the raffle for a free copy signed of Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades, go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com, leave us a comment, and in the subject line, put Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades, raffle. Also leave us a question. Welcome back. We're talking about Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades here with Tana and also Chloe. We're so excited to be with her. This is lesson 3. And, you know, one of the big things, and I know you've been tortured by living in our family for a very long time, when you used to come at Sunday school and put a donut in my face and say, hey, look what they gave us for Sunday school.
Oh,
I'm
some
great.
people.
Great. Go to get your soul fed, and those people were trying to kill you. Food is so important
It is.
to learning. And we wonder why there's a skyrocketing increase in ADHD, but all you have to do is look at school lunches.
This is one of my pet peeves. When I would be taking you to school in the mornings and there's across the street, and I understand. I mean, I get it. People are busy. We've got 2 parents working now and they're dropping their kids off early to school, and I'd see them coming out of the grocery store across the street. There's a bakery inside the grocery store, and they're walking out with donuts and bagels and muffins. And these kids, you know, what frustrates me about it is this. Most people may not have known, but these kids are getting in trouble. And I knew some of these kids, and they're getting in trouble. They're getting calls home. They're saying, you know, they're getting labeled as problem children. They're on the list all the time, and they're getting, you know, they're going to the doctor and being told they have ADD and learning problems, which they may, but no one is telling them, change your diet. Okay, these kids should not be having sugar and simple carbs for breakfast, right? If you've got ADD especially.
So I didn't learn anything about
16
this in
hours, right?
medical school.
Right.
So out of the 80,000 hours it took me to become a psychiatrist and a child psychiatrist, I had 16 hours
Right.
of nutrition and not one lecture on how food affects your mind. But what taught me, and this was the mother of an autistic child, is when I took him off gluten and dairy, the next week he had 50 words.
Right.
And it's just, there's a huge connection between how you perform in school and the nutrition going to your brain.
Well, and it frustrates me when people start to have this argument. It's like they'll start with, oh, calories are calories. Really? We'll tell that to a diabetic. Calories are not calories, right? They're just not.
Nobody knows what that means.
Okay, so
She's a little bit of a nerd, so she kind of assumes that everyone else is a nerd.
diabetics cannot just go eat a bunch of sugar and simple carbohydrates because it's going to jack up their blood sugar. They can't do that because they don't have the insulin to process it, right? And then they have to go take insulin. So calories are not calories. If they eat correctly, then they need to take less medicine. So calories are not calories. And if you have ADD or you've got a learning problem, it's more important that you eat really healthy. Not more important than a diabetic. It's more important. It's just more important overall.
It's important.
Right. That you eat really healthy, because when you have ADD, your frontal lobes are sleepy. Okay. The last thing you want to do is go eat simple carbs and sugar, which are going to drop your frontal lobes more. It's actually going to affect serotonin and drop your frontal lobes. You want something like protein in the mornings, because you want protein and healthy fat, which is going to increase dopamine, which helps you focus. It also stays with you longer and balances blood sugar.
So in Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades, we talk about brain types. So we've already brought that. And Chloe's a type 3.
Yeah, she
where
doesn't do well on
her
high protein
brain
diet.
is really busy. And if she would go on the Atkins diet, on a really low carbohydrate
Yes.
diet, she would
She gets
become
angry.
unhappy.
I tried keto just because I wanted to try it, because I am one of those people who's like, oh, just might as well try it, right? I was not a happy person.
She overfocused
At all.
on everything that bothered
Let her
her.
talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Were you
I
dating Michael when You tried keto?
Oh no, I wouldn't. Well, I still wouldn't be. Um, no, I was not nice. But I've had to kind of balance it out because
Yeah.
just like not everyone learns the same, and not everyone studies the same, not everyone's function is the same as far as organization and that kind of stuff. Well, not everyone has the same diet which optimizes
Totally true.
their productivity. So a high protein diet, low carb, does not optimize my productivity. I don't get as much done. I'm cranky. And
Matches her brain.
I'm also active. I'm very active. I do like 3 different sports. But there's healthy carbs and there's unhealthy carbs, right? So just loading yourself with a bunch of sugar, I crash really fast. That doesn't sustain me throughout the day with school and with all my sports and that kind of stuff. So sugar doesn't work with that. Obviously, I've had to experiment at what works best for me. I can't go with no carbs. I'm just not that type. But there's healthy carbs. She has amazing desserts and aerobics and stuff like that. We make muffins and cookies and brownies that are healthy, but that fulfill that need for me. I need carbs and I'm happier.
You're also a little veggie queen.
But
So
also,
th- so this
but also
is-
vegetables and protein and
So this is really important.
And that matches her brain.
Knowing your brain
Yeah.
type. So Chloe's a type 3 where her brain is busy. If we just put her on a high protein diet, she would concentrate
busier.
more
And my anxiety
on the
gets much
things
worse.
that upset her.
Right.
As opposed to Alize, who has a sleepy brain, and she might do really well
Right.
on a higher protein, lower carbohydrate
So-
diet. So in the book, we talk to you about how you know your type, what are the right things for your type. But the reason I think that mental health problems in kids is skyrocketing is the ease of fast food restaurants and processed
Well,
food.
and everything
There's
is
a
sugar
study-
and red food dye or food dyes.
There's
and
a study in Australia where they looked at 2 outer islands. One of them had fast food restaurants, the other one did not. And the island that didn't have the fast food restaurants had higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids. 97% of the American population is deficient in omega-3s, which make up 25% of nerve cell membranes. In your brain,
Yeah.
25% of the fat is omega-3 fatty acids. And on the island that had fast food restaurants, low omega-3s, 5 times the level of depression.
So for teenagers, especially because I'm adding to this because of the book, if you're a high school student or even college, I think a big reason it's very important. Educating yourself and being aware is very important. And I think a lot of high schoolers, college students, they're so focused and so aware of their grades and their school that food and sleep are an afterthought, and they don't often realize that they correlate strongly. And obviously money, those types of things, you're managing your money. And so between classes going and running for fast food, or even at the lunch table we have like energy drinks, like sugary everything and
Caffeinated
candies, we have
drinks.
vending machines, and it's like that quick fix, and we're not thinking that food correlates to how I do on this test that I'm about to take. We just don't think about that because we're young and we have other priorities and other focuses. I'm surely not perfect. I'm a teenager, so it's like every now and then I'm like, okay, I'm with my friends, so it's like the fast food and that kind of stuff. But I try to be just aware of how it affects me the next day when I get brain fog and I'm like, I wonder what's wrong with me today. It's probably because I had a milkshake yesterday. It's like that kind of, it's noticing that difference and being aware of it. And I think just being conscious of how it affects you
it's very smart.
is very important. So if you went out tomorrow and you got fast food and then, you had a test or you tried to study, just pay attention. Just do a little experiment and pay attention. Okay, what is the difference?
Right.
And then you'll figure out what works for you and what doesn't. So if I went on a high protein, That's not going to work for me either. But going out and eating a bunch of sugar, that doesn't work for me either. So I found
So you need a little bit of
balance,
protein, a little
but
bit
healthy
of
carbs.
protein and healthy carbs.
One of my favorites, actually 2 studies out of Holland, showed that by changing kids' diets, they took a group of ADD kids, and by changing their diets, they improved their symptoms 70%.
70% of them actually lost the diagnosis
Right.
of ADD.
So what they
was
took
crap.
out was they took out sugar, gluten, dairy, food dyes. And there was sugar, gluten, dairy, food dyes, and corn. And so, and everyone's like, oh, there's nothing to eat. Well, that's why I wrote
There's 10,000 things to
cookbooks,
eat.
right?
Right. You just have to be
you just
smart
have to learn,
and
you
know
have to
how
be
to pick.
focused.
One of my favorite little trips was Chloe's skin started breaking out. I think you were 11, and you went, help me with this. And so remember, we went to Whole Foods,
Yes.
and I'm like, okay, your job is to pick 10 things you love that love you back.
Right.
And I taught you how to read food labels. This is what they should be teaching in school,
Yeah.
how to read food labels. Unfortunately, she was, I don't know, in 3rd grade, and the school district sent home a letter
Oh, dear.
that basically said,
Oh.
teach your children that all
All foods
food
are good.
all foods are good. And when Dana read it, she wrote them a 3-page response.
I volunteered to go
You know,
teach.
it's a miracle that I was the teacher's pet all the way through school. I don't know how I did it. I really, you know what?
I volunteered all the way through school, and I remember at the end of 3rd grade, I think it was, they had Volunteer Appreciation Day, and I came walking in one day, and there were 2 teachers walking toward me, and one was carrying cupcakes, and one was carrying donuts or something, and they were walking toward me, and I go, hi. They saw me, literally their jaws dropped at the very same moment. They spun around, they turned around and walked away, and I'm like. And then it occurred to me why they did it. They were like guilty. And then all of a sudden they kind of stopped and they realized what they did. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, you guys act like you're in 2nd grade. Like, what is that?
When we come back, we're going to talk about more practical tips for you to be a lifelong learner and improve your grades or your salary. We're raffling off after each episode a free copy of Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades, signed. Go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com and leave us a comment. And in the subject line, write Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades, raffle. Also leave us questions and comments.
Welcome back. We're on day 4 talking about change your brain, change your grades. And so happy we've got Chloe here. We're having a great time. And as one of the contributors, she's here talking about it with us, and we're having a wonderful time. Please leave us questions or comments. You can tag Tana Amen, like at Tana Amen for Instagram, at Daniel Amen. You can go to the Brain Warriors Way podcast.com. We're also going to be doing a book giveaway. So stick with us. We'll tell you how to get that book at the end. So what are we talking about today with Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades?
I'm going to talk about giving presentations in class or at work. And it's the number one fear in America is speaking in public, because people think they're being judged. And I guess in a way they are being judged.
You're being
and
graded.
So they're anxious and worried about it, what other people think of them. Has this ever been an issue for you, Chloe?
Okay, you know what? I have to be honest with this one. I definitely had my things in school that were big challenges for me, but I really like to talk.
Really?
And I like to talk in front of big groups of people, and I liked to be the center of attention. So, I mean, honesty is key, right?
You're in the right family.
This one, I would get nervous before certain presentations, but this was never my, never a big weakness for me, but I definitely have great tips, because I've had to learn how to give different types of presentations.
Well, you've sang at church and
I'm in acting now, so I audition
you were
in
in
front
my
of casting
last
directors all the
public
time.
television special in front of millions of people.
And I still remember your
watch
very
that.
first presentation, and you knocked it out of the park. So.
I mean, talk about being judged, walking into an audition room with a bunch of casting directors just looking at you.
And they're literally judging you.
They're literally,
Yeah.
judging you.
So what are the tips?
Okay, so let me think of a few really good ones. The one for me that's really key, and this might sound like kind of a broad statement, but I mean, every person has a different way that they do it. It was honestly just minimizing in your head, minimizing the entire thing in your head. Because we make it into this big thing. We brew on it before we go to present or to talk to someone, to get up in front of someone and talk. We go over it and over it and over it in our head. We think about every possible thing that could go wrong, and it ends up
Big.
becoming this really big thing. For me, because I do have anxiety and I do overthink things, it was honestly just the time that I would take before to brew on it and to make it bigger, take that same amount of time to do the opposite. Take that same amount of time to intentionally shrink it down, make it smaller, not less important, but make it just the entire ordeal smaller in my head. So it's almost like it's so simple, but it's like it's just a presentation. They're just people. They're, like they're my friends. I'm like it's like and it's just that language that you tell yourself.
So the thoughts you
Yeah.
tell yourself matter.
Right.
Yeah. So what you're saying is exactly what I did for my black belt test. Like you said, this is not just for grades, right? Or just for school. So when I was taking my black belt test, and I was really, really nervous about it because I was testing at a school where it's really high level people. And I had built in my head, I didn't realize it, but I built in my head this idea of these big monster guys, and a couple of them were world champion, karate tournament fighters. And I'm like, so I was really scared of it. And I went to my,
You're a middle-aged mom.
right, middle-aged mom. So I
almost
was telling myself,
50.
a middle-aged mom, these
Not
guys
just-
are
you
big.
were not just telling yourself, you were telling me.
Everybody, right. So, but I have an NLP coach I go to, and what you're talking about is a perfect NLP tip, right? So neuro-linguistic programming. And that was the first thing he said. He goes, I'd be scared too.
Right.
So that's exactly what we did. What I did is I shrunk all the big monsters, these guys, these dudes that were world champions. I shrunk them down to be normal size, to be the same size I was. I made myself a little bit bigger. I turned them black and white, made myself color. I made their voices sound like Mickey Mouse, and then
Right.
I put them in boxers. But
So envisioning it in your head, planning it through in your head is another thing that I do for sure. But it's just so much for me is just about like the language that I tell myself. It's just presentation. And it's just like, if something was to go wrong, because a lot of times what people do, and maybe this works for some people, but it just did not work for me, is ignoring the fact that something could go wrong. So it's always like, no, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to go right. Right. And you tell yourself this to make yourself less nervous, but that's not realistic. And when something does go slightly wrong, then you're like, this isn't according to plan, and then my head just like shuts down. I'm like, but I told myself nothing was going to go wrong, and now something's going wrong. What do I do? And I'm having this panic attack.
instead of what if something goes
So
wrong?
if
What am I gonna do?
beforehand, if I went, okay, so if that did happen, my worst fear, that thing that I'm thinking about, if that did happen, rather than putting it in the back of my head, if I bring it forward and acknowledge it. So if that were to happen, what would those people that I'm so afraid of, what would they do? They're probably not gonna sit there afterwards and go, that was really terrible. Like, I've never seen anything that bad. They're gonna go to Starbucks, they're gonna get their latte, and they're gonna go on with their life. And I know that because that's what I would do.
Brain
right?
warriors don't go to Starbucks and get their latte.
I'm sorry.
Just saying.
She gets an
unsweetened-
almond milk,
I get
yeah.
an unsweetened almond milk latte. Okay, it's brain
But the brain warriors
approved.
listening. So the thing I'm hearing though is that you prepare. So to deal with presentation anxiety, you are prepared.
The other thing
and you work hard.
But the other thing I
Preparation
heard-
decreases anxiety. The other thing is don't leave because I've seen this happen, that people get anxious and they don't show up. Because when you don't show up or you leave a situation, the situation now has you by the throat
Right.
and will choke the life out of you,
Yeah.
will control you. That's how this psychiatric disorder called agoraphobia, which literally it's Greek, means fear of the marketplace. I've treated people who have not left their home for 20 years because they were afraid they would go out and have a panic attack. And it's because initially they were worried about something. It caused them not to go to the store. not to go to the mall, not to go to their friend's house, and it started controlling them. The other thing that's so important is controlling your breath. And because that's something you can control, but when you get anxious, almost immediately, your breathing starts to become faster, less efficient, which means you get less oxygen to your brain. And when your brain gets less oxygen, it panics, because if the brain is deprived of oxygen for just a few minutes, it'll actually start killing cells.
Yeah.
And so it freaks out. And so the magic number is take 3 seconds to breathe in, hold it just for a second, and then take 6 to breathe out. And if you do that 10 times, your anxiety will
It drops
be
your
less,
adrenaline.
along with getting your mindset right.
Yeah.
So
that's the part that I
important.
heard that I really want to touch on, because what you said is so important. What you were talking about is you really make a point not to take what other people say personally, and realize that they're probably not saying all that much. And I love Byron Katie's saying, what people say about me is none of my business. But the truth is, you're saying, what do you say? The 80-40-60 rule is really important too.
Well, this is the 18-40-60 rule, which just saved my life. It says when you're 18, you worry about what everybody's thinking of you. And when you're 40, you don't give a damn what anybody thinks
So
about
true.
you. And when you're 60, you realize nobody's been thinking about you at all.
But fortunately,
Even-
you figured it out at 15,
Yeah.
right? That they're
Well,
really not.
gosh, especially 15-year-olds. No one's thinking about you. They're all thinking about themselves. They're thinking about the selfie they just posted. Like, it's not. No, yeah, I couldn't agree with that more.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So, A student, hard worker, obviously your mom and dad are super proud of you. Some other tips as we close this last podcast: change your brain, change your grades. When you were reading the book, anything you went, oh, well, that's cool, I'm going to do that. Or the things you added. There are all these tips by Chloe and Alize that really added great fun, but also practical tips of living in a world that has Instagram and Facebook and constant interruption.
Right. So I could add something about that, about time management for sure, because that is one thing that I've had to learn, because I'm involved in so much that sometimes I can get scattered. And when I need to get something done, it's important to learn time management. And some little things that I do for myself, I guess now that I'm like talking about it, I'm realizing that a lot of how I regulate myself is just by asking myself questions and changing like little things in my mind, like just the language I use with myself. But for time management, it's just write yourself what I did. I actually did this the other day. Write yourself a little note card, like one of the little study cards. And give yourself 3 little tactics, just 3, because if you overload yourself, you'll never remember them. 3 things that you are going to either ask yourself that you're going to do, so ask yourself that you're going to do, or you're going to think in your head to keep yourself on track. And every time you start to feel yourself going off track, stop and go through those 3 things that are on that note card. And by the end of those 3 things, usually you realize you might not want to get back on track. You might not want to focus, but you have a harder time getting sidetracked, because I think what really gets us sidetracked now is it's instant gratification, right? So we're studying, we get bored, we pick up our phones. But we do it so instinctively. It's not even that it's like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I should probably pick up my phone. We don't even have that much time in between. We just
It's
instinctively
automatic.
go on
It's a habit.
Instagram. But if you stop for that 1 second, and some of the ones that are, okay, so like my little note card for time management, I wrote one of my questions to myself, and it's kind of random, but it's, am I confident about this? Am I confident about the fact that I'm picking up my phone and going on Instagram when I know I should be studying for a test? Usually the answer is no. Actually answer them. One of the other ones, I think the second one is, what is going to matter most later? The fact that I studied for this test, or the fact that I went on Instagram? Am I going to regret it later that I did this? So actually answer it. Which one is going to matter most later? And then the third one is, it's just, and then a blank. That's a big one for me with almost everything. It's just Instagram, or it's just an hour. If I plan to study for an hour, it's just an hour, and then I can go on Instagram. So fill in that blank, and usually it really changes it around. And when I'm trying to eat healthy, that's a big one too. This is like kind of getting off track, but it's very important. When I'm trying to eat healthy and I come downstairs or I'm out and it's like I walk by ice cream or something and it's like, I really want it. Usually instinctively we do the same thing. If we don't stop and think about it, we'll just do it and then we regret it later. If you stop and take that 1 second and you have a note card and you go through your 3 things, usually it works. But what I do is like, it's just ice cream. It's just pizza. And then it's like, what's going to matter most later, you know?
That's a great use of language.
And
It's
another
just-
3 words
Right.
that I use all the time. I used it with a patient this morning. Does it fit? If I do this, does it fit with the goals I have?
Right.
Well, and I
The
like
goals
then
I have to be healthy, the goals I have to be smart, the
And
goals I have to keep my brain intact.
And I like then
does
what?
it
Right. And
fit?
you know what? It works the other way with motivation too. Nike said it best. Just do it. So if I'm like, if I'm, playing or if I'm at dance or I'm in an audition, it's like, it's just an audition or it's just like 5 minutes. And it's like my performance actually increases because like, just do it. What do you have to lose, right?
Well,
Go
and
for
if
it.
we
Just go
look
for
at
it.
your
Just go for
ability
it.
to perform 2 years ago versus now, it's like,
And it's
radical.
and
so
people
much
actually
hard to learn
don't know
mindset.
that Chloe is the face for Unicorn Slime, and
You
her
just had to do it.
her
didn't you? You
videos
just
have
had
like
to.
26
He loves
million
that.
views. She's the ambassador of Poopsie.
It's way more than that now.
And,
You're
wow.
looking at the face.
It's fun. Well, you have been such a joy.
Thank you for having me.
Actually, for your
Yeah,
whole
it's
life, you've been a
wonderful.
joy. We're grateful that you helped with Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades. Coming up, you're going to meet our niece Alize. She is awesome as well. If you want Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades signed by all 3 of us, go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. Leave us a comment, a question, a review, and in the subject line, put Change Your Brain, Change Your Grades raffle, and we'll enter you into a drawing. Take care.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.